And I'm Lisa.
And this is the Paid Media Playbook, where we talk to marketing professionals about their challenges, tactics, and triumphs.
Join us here at Double Z Media for weekly conversations about media strategies for marketing leaders.
Welcome, Kathy Roeder from the Port of Seattle. Kathy has just been promoted to Chief of Staff at the Port. Kathy's going to walk us down the path of what led her to where she is today.
I started my career working for a member of Congress. So my first job is his front desk person, receptionist, right? Answering the phone, answering the mail, making copies, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So that's how I started. And I stayed in that office for a couple of years. There's a ton of turnover in DC. People change jobs really quickly. Early on in your career, you should change jobs pretty frequently anyway, whether you're in the same organization, moving up or changing orgs. But I early on really wanted that press secretary job. It just looked fun and kind of had that fancy, it's on TV, it seems sort of fancy.
Yeah.
So that's the job I wanted. And it was one of the early points in my career where I asked somebody, how do you get that? And they're like, well, you have to have this certain kind of experience dealing with reporters. But one of the main rules was nobody's allowed to talk to reporters. So I'm like, okay, well, the rules are I can't talk to reporters, but I can only get this job unless I have experience talking to reporters. How do I do that?
Yeah.
So I got really lucky. I'd been in the office 3 years with 2 different jobs, and our chief of staff moved to New York, and our current press secretary, who had a bigger job than just press secretary, had a couple things under him, moved into the chief of staff job. And I was like, oh, maybe. And they were with many sets of training wheels, yes. So they actually told me it's easier. We already know you. We like you. We can manage you. You're a known thing. It's easier to sort of teach you than hire somebody else. And that was an early career lesson for me about just showing your value in an organization and having them want you enough that they're willing to let you flex into a different role because you've proven yourself.
Awesome. Yeah.
But we had zero budget. I mean, congressional offices get no money for marketing. We had an email newsletter. We actually created the email newsletter while I was there. And we had, this is a long time ago. I don't even know how we may have had a voter file or some kind of, we may have gotten something that was publicly available that we used, but super clunky technology and old, where you're you have macros that you're inserting.
Yeah. I remember that. And you had to, it was such a big deal to even put together the format.
Yes.
To format
it.
it.
Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I've cried at least twice over email newsletter formatting.
when the
it's
automatic
midnight.
stuff
You're
came out,
what?
you're how does this I didn't, wow.
Yeah. But when I stayed in DC for a while, I left the congressman's office. I really wanted to work on a presidential campaign. And ultimately my goal is to work in the White House. So there's 435 members of Congress between the House and the Senate, and each one has a communications director or a press secretary. And I figured my path to get on a presidential campaign was through comms. And I was like, there's a lot of competition among Congress, even though they're not all Democrats, but I think I need to go somewhere else to stand out more. So I went to go work for the AFL-CIO, which is the labor umbrella organization. And labor has obviously a lot of close ties to Democratic politics. So it was a good place to start kind of making some connections. And that was smart strategy for getting to a presidential campaign. And I ended up working for a guy named Dick Gephardt, who ran for president twice. He didn't win either time. He ran in 88. I was on his campaign in 2004. Wow. He dropped out during the primary, and John Kerry ended up winning the Democratic primary that year. And I moved it's not difficult to move from one candidate to another. So I was able
at that point they need people. So they're
they're growing Tennessee, which is literally what happened. I went from New Hampshire to Tennessee in a day. and then to
Oh,
Ohio,
that's exciting.
and then back to DC, and then ended up on the general. And of course, he lost. And then after that, it was kind of a massacre for Democrats that year, and I moved to New York after that and moved to issue advocacy. And so all of that career up until then had been like for people, individual candidates or elected officials, and then moved to New York and worked for a firm called SS, which is now owned by Saatchi & Saatchi. And they were mostly an advertising firm.
Yes.
But they had a lot of love for politics, and every now and then do kind of an issue advocacy campaign. They did like Rock the Vote.
Yeah,
years
exactly.
ago.
They're well known to be like just really thoughtful, creative too.
But I was not a creative. And that was my first time understanding the word creative.
Yeah.
And understanding creatives as a category of people.
Yeah.
Mainly by being told, you are not one. Like, those are the creatives.
Are you a creative? No, I'm not a creative. Yeah, we're paid media. Yeah.
I thought I was like, I'm creative. And they're like, you are not a creative.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I guess I didn't.
No, it is funny to treat it like that. Like, do you have the creative? Is the creative ready? I mean, meaning it's a noun or a person,
yes.
But either or, it's not a description.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. An adjective.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also not me. That was the thing they made really clear. You are an account manager. That's what you are. And I was like, okay, I get it.
Stop giving your opinions. No,
Yeah.
Just kidding.
But that was fun. I mean, I didn't have any budget or buying strategy opportunities there, but they were really collaborative in terms of campaign development. And so there were a lot of opportunities, and it was an amazing experience working at a shop like that, just because you could really see creative development. And, you know, maybe you watch advertising campaigns now and you're like, how'd they come up with a lizard? And I'm like, oh, I know.
You were in the brainstorming meetings. Yeah.
I definitely know somebody was like, what about a lizard? And a lot of things that you think like, that's dumb, or I would never do that. If you just put everything into it and really believe in it and sell it as a package, will work. But I
throw everything against the wall and then find that thing and then own it and
commit to it.
Yep.
But you made your way to Seattle eventually.
So I really loved working for SSK. It's an amazing firm and with great leadership, but I wasn't very motivated by the corporate work in the way that I had hoped to be. And I was really still, I think, kind of discouraged about the loss in the presidential race, and then the ramifications of that. And I was like, I don't want to be too political, but really upset by the war in Iraq and the role of the United States there. And so I decided to go there. I had some friends who had participated in an NGO. The Saddam Hussein regime had been toppled, and they were trying to set up a transitional government. So there were tons of NGOs that were active in Iraq trying to establish a society, because one of the conditions of the transitional government was that anybody who was part of the Ba'ath political party, which had been Saddam's party, couldn't be part of the new government. So you took every technocrat, everybody who knew the passwords for running the water department, and exiled them. Which I don't know how you do truth and reconciliation peace processes, but there is a technical loss of information when you take all the people who've been running the government and kick them out. So everybody was just kind of now what? And so there were a lot of international actors sort of coming
in and try to triage.
Yeah, let's restart the water treatment plant and figure this out. And I was participating in their political party development, which was such a fascinating process, because it had been a dictatorship for so long. One of the things that we were doing when we were there was working on publicity. And in Iraq, all of the media is paid because the print media there is not advertising based. So you pay for coverage. So there's always an assumption if you're having an event that you're going to pay for the reporter to come.
Wow. There's never any there's no PR in that way, meaning you're not trying to get what if nobody paid? They're just not going to cover this really important thing?
Probably not. There is a culture around paying. reporters. And I wouldn't even necessarily...
So that is so manipulated, right?
Well, it is, except there's like 700 newspapers.
Oh, gotcha.
So there's so much print, and there's TV, and I think the TV works a little bit different. We only had TV coverage on one event we did. So I do think like the TV might work a little bit differently. And you do have like Al Jazeera and bigger cable networks that I think are run a little bit differently. But for print, you're pretty much like, you're going to give that reporter a stipend. You're definitely going to give them lunch. You might pay for their ride. And when you open the newspapers, there's actually like not a lot of ads.
Because everyone paid for
they're just chock-block full stories.
With nothing that said sponsored content.
No.
This is it.
So that was really interesting to me, too.
When you pay for it there, do you have any editorial control?
Tends to be positive. I don't read Arabic, so I can't say like whether all of our coverage was great. And the press conference is like a big tradition there, and they love press conferences. I mean, this is a long time ago.
Paid.
Just sure. But they're like, no one will come to your press conference unless you're paying. That was the experience I had. I can't say if that's everyone's
across
experience.
The board, but yeah.
And also, this was 2006, so things may have even changed more. It was a very difficult time this was like David Petraeus in the Surge days. God. So like anybody trying to work as a journalist in Iraq at all was a saint and doing really heroic work. So it's such a different, I just hope nobody reads that as like a judgment.
Well, it's very different from the Port of Seattle now, where I know local newspapers absolutely write articles without you asking for it. And then sometimes even that you would rather they not, perhaps.
Yeah, no, that's true. So I started working at the Port 8 years ago as the communications director there. And we were at a really important time in terms of the way the media landscape is changing, not just in Seattle, but everywhere. And newsrooms just have fewer resources to devote to, particularly like government, and especially a lot of the storytelling and kind of brand awareness that the Port wants to do, where we're like, look at this great thing we did in the community, and it's kind of like, is it on fire?
Yeah, exactly. If it bleeds, it leads.
It's right? Great. And they're like, we're busy. So we had to kind of talk about, did we have our communications structured in the right way to do positive storytelling, with knowing, sort of recognizing that the media might be less and less of a partner in that. And that was a big part of the team rebuilt the webpage, which wasn't the purpose, but as they were going through the rebuild of the webpage, they built a blog knowing that owned content was going to be a bigger and bigger part of our strategy, and prepared for a really robust email. We had like one email newsletter at the time, and really robust email marketing, and just kind of laying the groundwork for the content first storytelling team that they have today.
You're like building your first party data so that you're getting so much more relevant over time. We have so many stakeholders, so many different departments that needs so much data and so much expertise from like every aspect is.
And we're very cautious. Ports are really big cybersecurity targets, and so there's a lot of security.
That's such a good point too.
It's kind of like there is no zero tolerance for failure. So there's a real aversion to any risk that would be like, whoa, this would be great for data and for audience targeting and like all these things. And if there's any kind of like a hint of a security risk to come with it, it's not like that's not going to balance out.
Such a good point. The Port is everything. Like, it's such a big deal.
At some point during this journey, working on the blog and working with news outlets, there was a decision that this organic coverage isn't enough.
Yes.
What was that decision-making process like?
It's iterative, right? There wasn't like a day where we said
you didn't wake up like,
well, it was like, we can't cover it. Like she said, right? Like, you can't cover it because hey, we are doing this for the environment right now. So we have to pay for it to get those stories published. I mean,
anybody who's working professionally in communications understands you need to have an integrated strategy. And, we knew we didn't have that's the best practice, and that we didn't have it, that you need that you need to be covering off on your own content. You need some paid. That's just, I just think of it as air cover. It's just always on. And then, you can like key campaign moments really focus on your earned. And that's the way I was sort of trained, just like the plan.
Yeah.
I was really growing more and more frustrated that we didn't have all the pieces of that best practice. And it's not an easy, the port is not a place that's really comfortable spending a lot of money on advertising.
Right. You don't want to always be blowing your own horn. You want other people to.
That's so the culture.
Party. Yep.
So the culture. And also like be careful with your dollars. That's definitely a factor.
Yep.
And also I think there's also a cultural thing in the Pacific Northwest too that's just kind of like you don't want to seem like you're like
ever ostentatious or whatever. I mean,
standing out too much, like the nail that pops up or like the tall poppy, gets the
under the radar. Yeah.
Right. So it's like,
nobody's driving Lamborghinis everywhere here. Like you don't see that much here like you would in San Diego.
Right. So it's hard to be under the radar though and like try to deliver your message.
Exactly. Like we have to be low key, but nobody knows. So yeah.
What a couple things helped in that, well, some really great leaders, I think, inside the port. And that's probably most important, for any organization is you can't have a communication strategy only come from the communications team. You have to have supporters.
Buy-in.
And so the managing director for the airport, a guy named Lance Little, is a really great marketer. I mean, he's also like a really great managing director for an airport, but like has just a great eye for communications and is very talented in communications. So he knew how important it was and he asked for it. He wanted more support, especially as we had big projects coming forward, and said, I want people to understand why we're doing this. So having those supporters outside of just like some great communicators being, this is what we should do, but having supporters ask for it was really instrumental.
Absolutely. Do you feel like there was an original channel that you focused on? And do you think that was the right thing to focus on?
Oh, what a great question. Social had always been, I think, a question for us, just because we know our audience is on social media and it's from a cost perspective, so much like you just can enter at a different point than television.
For sure.
Yeah.
So social just seemed achievable, but TV is kind of still like in a lot of ways the holy grail, I think, just because people see it. And we've always talked to you about like, it just helps when people see it.
It does. Especially with the port, because it's very diverse. And the reach that you get with TV is meaning the stakeholders versus the public versus everything. I mean, there's just so much reach with TV, and especially with news, because, we buy a lot of news with you guys so that we can be kind of in that, news and information. People are gathering information, and then we have But I know people are seeing the social because particularly like on, it's measurable. Well, unlike TV.
There's that. But even like some of our paid social, like on Facebook, I see people, I can see the likes and comments, and I see people I know who I work with liking and commenting. So I know they're seeing the content.
Yeah.
They'll never tell me.
Yeah.
But if they see it on TV, they'll call me. Yeah. I'll be like, I saw her ad.
Same with billboards.
Yeah, right?
The billboards are like, I could have 3 billboards and the client's like, oh my God, like the employees are so happy. So
it's really different. I don't know what it is about social. It's like, they're seeing it, but they're not.
Well, it's targeted.
It just fades into
we're targeting the actual client. We're not targeting your stakeholders, but
matters.
Even
when the stakeholders do see it, I do think there is a cachet to being on the television.
Yes.
That you don't have with being on Meta.
For sure.
Totally agree with that. So the one thing that I think I've always kind of like undervalued is the streaming ads.
Television. Yeah.
Or radio, streaming.
Because it's super targeted.
Really
meaning we could, and I love geo-targeting.
It's like, not skippable.
Yeah.
You're locked into it.
Yep. And we know how many people watched it. We actually know it's not some Nielsen estimate.
Yeah. So I think that's a really exciting channel, is the streaming for video and radio or podcast. But I think when we were first initiating this work, it wasn't really on our radar.
If you could give yourself one piece of advice at the beginning of your time, let's just say at the port.
When you first started at the port.
What would it be?
Oh, I don't have any advice for myself at the beginning of the port because I don't have enough distance, but I do have I actually have a piece of advice from the job I left right before the port. And actually this just came up recently with a colleague of mine who had a like superstar employee give notice without like really kind of any warning. And that's exactly what I did to my boss when I left to go to the port. And I really hurt her feelings that she had mentored me and, would have surely been sad to hear that I was job hunting, but I think would have rather been a partner in that than like me calling her while she was on vacation in Idaho and been like, wow, something happened faster than I thought and I'm quitting. And she's like, wait, what?
So you wish you would have like kind of communicated, this is where I'm at and what I would have, this is what I'm thinking, just so you know, this is like give her a heads up.
Yeah. And so I did change roles within the port recently and had been really transparent with my manager and even before I applied for a different role inside the port, but like had just shared with him, I think I'm kind of reaching the end of what I have to contribute on this and would love to have somebody else take the reins, and was even brainstorming with him on some people I might talk to. And so that would be my one piece of advice, is kind of like, don't shut. If you have a good manager, and we were talking before, I've only had amazing managers, then like treat them like they're amazing and let them be an ally and bring them in.
Do you have a green flag for what would make a manager who you would trust with that kind of professional development?
When somebody believes in you. I don't know if you can like nail it down to one or two things specifically, but if you feel like somebody believes in you,
and has your back, like I want the best for you. I know that with me as a boss for a leader for a long time, when somebody would leave, I was like, that's awesome. Yeah. Like, I see what you're going to do and I totally support that. You know what I mean?
I think there's one other piece of it too, is like, it's knowing your value in the organization. And I think people are afraid to tell their manager they're going to leave because they think they're going to be like retaliated against, like they're going to get pre-fired. Right. But
that's a good point.
If I am too valuable to pre-fire,
right.
That like
let's make this a positive transition.
I'm on the hunt. I will keep you informed. If you have advice for me, I'm open to it, but I'm going to keep you.
That
I'm going to be
such an evolved way of thinking. And I do believe that, I know like as a Gen X boss, that would be wonderful. You know what I mean? That would be just such a great communication.
Yeah, because you can start planning and think. You're not going to fire them if they're great.
No.
You want to develop them.
Yeah, figure it out. But whatever it is, if they're like set to leave, then they're set to leave. But let's transition and make it a win-win.
Yes. I think that's a scary, hard thing for people to do. I did it once in my job when I left, when we were living on the East Coast.
Big
and I was
jobs, it's like
number 3 in an organization that had grown to 13 people, and I had been a big part of the growth. And I told my business partner basically, like, we're going to move in a year. And I don't know if I'm going to work for you remotely or if I'm going to get a different job, and I won't know until I get there. But we were able to do some strategic hiring in that time and really like lay out a plan.
Well, then let's end this podcast with, may everyone listening have a boss good enough you would tell that you're job hunting.
Tell them I'm going to quit. Well, thanks for having me.
Kathy Roeder from the Port of Seattle.
Thanks for listening to the Paid Media Playbook. Want more content like this? Follow our agency, Double Z Media, on LinkedIn. You can find the link in the episode description.